Now, data point tonight is quite related to that particular story, and you're talking about the allocations under the National Executive. You will recall that last week we spoke about 4.24 trillion shillings, which is the total budget for the financial year 2025-2026, the estimates as they are now. And let's get down to the sectors. The education sector has been allocated 701.9 billion shillings, despite the gap that Stephen Leto is reporting there. That is 28% of the budget estimates for the financial year that begins on July 1st. The energy, infrastructure and ICT sector takes 500.7 billion shillings, which is equivalent to 20%. The public administration and international relations takes 321 billion shillings, equivalent to 13%. And then the national security sector is taking some 251 billion shillings. This is putting the national defense as well as the National Intelligence Service together. You get to that point of 10% of the national budget. Let's take a look at other key allocations. For the health sector, it's taking 137 billion shillings, which is equivalent to 5%. For agriculture, rural and urban development. Remember that agriculture is one of the key drivers of the economy, having the largest share of the gross domestic product of the country. 78 billion shillings are the estimates allocated. That is 3% of the entire budget. And then for economic, commercial and commercial affairs, 58 billion shillings, equivalent to 2%. Remember, the total for the national executive is 2.43 trillion shillings, which is the base that you're using for calculation of those percentages. Now, something else to consider. I've told you that education is taking 701 billion shillings. So why is this money going to? The Teacher Service Commission is taking nearly 55% of 387.7 billion shillings. Free primary education is taking some 22.2 billion shillings as per the allocations. The free day secondary education is taking some 89.5 billion shillings. Remember, Stephen Leto is talking about the gap in free junior secondary education because it's not one of the factors considered in that budget estimates. For university education, you're talking about some 81.9 billion shillings. These are resources that should be going towards sponsoring students in the various public institutions we have. Again, remember, the total for education sector is 701 billion shillings. Let's take a look at what else to consider this evening on data point. Primary teachers, again, so the Teacher Service Commission will get a total of 387.7 billion shillings. You may want to know, where does it go? For primary teachers across the country, in public institutions, they will use some 202 billion shillings ordinarily for salaries and personnel emoluments. Secondary teachers will be taking 172.6 billion shillings. Tertiary teachers will be taking some 2 billion shillings. Teachers capacity development. Remember, there's been a question about CBC or CBE empowerment. So the Teacher Service Commission will get some 1.6 billion shillings to build that capacity. And for TSC administrative expenditure, it is at 8.6 billion shillings just to run the office. Again, let's take a look at what else you need to know of key figures within the budget estimates for 2025-26. The Defense Ministry has been allocated some 200 billion shillings. It is important to note that out of this, much of the money, which is at 195 billion shillings, will be going to recurrent expenditure. These are personnel emoluments and also operational costs of the ministry. And of course, falling under is the Kenya Defence Forces. Then 4.9 billion shillings will go towards development expenditure. For the National Police Service, of course, a critical institution, 125.2 billion shillings, of which 123.7 billion shillings, again, more than 90% goes towards recurrent expenditure. The National Intelligence Service takes 51.4 billion shillings, and all of it will be going towards recurrent expenditure, which is to do with the personnel emolument and, of course, operational costs of that institution. Now, for key offices at the presidency, State House will be taking some 8.5 billion shillings. And, of course, out of that, much of it is recurrent, 7.6 billion shillings. Again, personnel emoluments as well as operational costs. Only 894 million shillings will be going towards development expenditure. For the Office of the Deputy President, or rather, the Office of the President, some 5.3 billion shillings is allocated and 3.8 billion shillings is recurrent. So there's a difference between the Office of the President and State House, as you know it. The Office of Deputy President will be taking some 2.9 billion shillings, much of which is for recurrent at 2.8 billion shillings, including hospitality that will be taking more than 1 billion shillings for the financial year that begins in July 1st. Let's take a look at what else we know about those key estimates. And you're talking about what's happening with the universal health coverage, the primary health care, last year, time like this, the government had allocated some 4.1 billion shillings for the financial year 2024-2025. Of course, this was raised in subsequent supplementary budgets, but now this time round, the government is allocating some 13 billion shillings towards that. And then for the emergency, critical and chronic illnesses fund, it was 2 billion shillings a time like this last year, but there's a proposal to allocate some 10 billion shillings, which is also an improvement from what you may have known it. Of course, this will also now join, it will be sent to the Social Health Authority, and at the same time, Kenyans will be contributing to the Social Health Insurance Fund to give universal health coverage on that front. And that's data point for this week. We'll continue to digest more on the plans of the government when it comes to the financial year 2025-2026.